Greetings. Welcome to another version of Rasta Now, where we do staccato monologue on issues of politics, religion, and culture from a Rastaman point of view. All right. My name is Dr. Dave Britton. I am a practicing attorney in New York and a doctor of legal science. I've posted maybe one video over the last many years, and um, I wanted to do this one on Rastafari. So we're going to do a brief overview of the organizations where you might find individuals, both man and woman, who say that they are Rastafaris. Okay? So here's a saying that we always use to say that you have to be careful of the vessel in which you carry your consciousness. What do I mean by that? The teachings that you get will determine your frame of mind in religious things, in philosophy, in science. Your education that you get will determine how you look on reality. And the culture that you live in will determine how you live on, how you deal with reality. All right? So, if the underlying framework of your reality is European based, then your way of seeing reality will be European based. So you are carrying your consciousness within a European vessel. All right? I'll give you one simple example. My brother Cornel West, brilliant brother, right? Out there fighting for us. But a particular segment of his philosophy is sitting squarely within a European paradigm, a European vessel. He constantly talk about the Socratic elements. He's a Socrates scholar. He loves Socrates. And for those who don't know, Socrates is a Greek philosopher who were murdered, basically, or he drank poison when they come to kill him because they believe that he was misleading the youths in Greece. So they jailed him, charged him, and his friend came to him and told him that he could escape, and he did not escape. He decided to kill himself. But when you read Socrates, you realize that Socrates is mainly what is the term sophistry. There's no substance to it, basically. I read Socrates and Plato and Aristotle when I was maybe like 18, 19, and realized basically that the philosophy had no substance to it. Some of what Aristotle say and some of what Plato say and some of what Socrates say does have substance. After all, the whole framework of their philosophy came straight from out of Egypt, came from out of Africa. So of course, we're gonna find those elements that somehow we might not know it consciously, but our mitochondrial DNA memory is attracted by it. So there are things that Socrates say that is good, but his whole mindset is from a European paradigm. And Brother Cornel West grabbed that. Brother Cornel West also grabbed the whole concept of Jesus Christ. I mean, Hey, now he's teaching at a seminary, maybe for some years now, right? But he considers himself a Christian within the European framework of Christianity. I know European misinterpret Christianity. All right. So you listen to Cornell, and he is positive on African centered progressiveness. He's positive on wanting to do for poor people, but his whole philosophy rests within a European paradigm. So you got to be careful of where you carry your consciousness because it will reflect back into the vessel in which you carry the consciousness. You have to make a clear break from the European mindset and the European paradigm, right? So, with that said, we look first at the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Now, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the, what you call it, oldest church, one of the oldest church um, in creation. It is the official church of Ethiopia, and it somewhat follows the European teaching of Jesus Christ and all that. All right. Um, I remember I attended a service in the church in Harlem, and I was surprised to see that it was somewhat between Catholic and Protestant. It was Orthodox, according to them, but it was somewhat between Catholic and Protestant. And they were talking about the coming of the Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ died to save our soul and all of that. Right. Now, you have Rasta people, people who call themselves Rasta man, who find no contradiction in being a part of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. None whatsoever. And they tell you I'm a Rasta man, but I'm an Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And you ask them mainly why. And they will tell you that, well, His Majesty was a Christian too, and His Majesty belonged to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So therefore, I don't see anything wrong with being a part of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. All right? So they are a part of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. But the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, as a vessel, still maintain a European paradigm. And we go look at it for on another podcast, right? But for now, you have the Rastaman who consider himself a member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which is basically a Christian organization with a Christian paradigm settled in a European vessel, right? Apart from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, you have the brethren them that call themselves the Garveyites. All right, it's Garvey organization, in a sense defunct, in a sense holding on for dear life. The what is it? UNIA, United Negro Improvement Association. I remember as a kid, all right, as a youth on Slipe Road, the Garveyites was across the street in what they call Edelweiss Park. All right, and for years it was abandoned, and it remained abandoned until I don't know who bought it. Maybe it was Hardware and Lumber, and then after Hardware and Lumber, it became some seafood place where they have seafood farm and all of that. But I remember on a few occasions we would see the Garveyites them come and they would hold their anniversary gatherings and all of that. But that's the Garveyites. Now the Rastaman will consider himself a Garveyite. Why? Marcus Garvey is considered amongst Rasta as a prophet. right? Because Marcus Garvey make one prophetic pronouncement in the 1920s when he said, look to Africa for the coming of a king, right? Look to Africa for the coming of a great king. Pray to the king, and the king will pray to the creator for your salvation. This was in the 20s, you know. And Garvey was big. People might not realize how big Garvey was, but Garvey had 1 million people coming up Fifth Avenue in 1922. 1 million black people. People was well behind him. All right. And Garvey movement was one of the first that attracted major governmental interference. Major government interference because of the fear, both on the economic level and on the political level, that Garvey and his movement presented to the government of the United States. Remember, now Garvey wanted to move people back to Africa. And there's a contradiction in that too, in terms of what happened to Garvey in the long run, right? But Garvey wanted people to move back to Africa to the point where I believe the government even tried to say, well, Liberia is there, that people should go to Liberia, and some people went to Liberia and created Liberia out of nothing, and Liberia stagnated for years until it becomes somewhat of a viable state, right? But that was Garveyites. People love Marcus Garvey because they consider him the philosopher. Up you mighty race, you know, people without a knowledge of the history, the people without any roots. You know, the philosophy of Marcus Garvey is strong. And nobody built up Africans in a diaspora esteem like Marcus Garvey. But you must remember that Garvey faced tremendous opposition from other African people in America, especially Webb Du Bois, who initially licked out against Garvey. Right? So you have Rastaman who consider himself Garveyites, and they will see some kind of divinity within Garvey. They will even consider Garvey as John the Baptist. All right? Egyptian call him Tat An, meaning the announcer. All right? I'm going to say, well, Garvey announced this, and therefore Garvey a prophet because he could see all these things. You know, Garvey said when the two sevens clash, you know, blood gonna run like river in Swallowfield and all those things, right? A lot of his talking didn't come to fruition. You know, a lot of his prophecy didn't happen. But what he did in the world of African people, both in Africa and Jamaica and across the world, is seen as super supportive of black people and super supportive of black people trying to create an existence for themselves. Right? So you have African leaders who look towards Garvey, right? Garvey, more than anybody else, was responsible for the whole Pan African movement. I mean, you know, people talk about Padmore and you know, the Pan African movement, Congress, and the man, but it was Garvey, right? Garvey's, you know, look back to Africa, you know what I mean? Both physically and mentally. So you have Rastaman who say, yeah, I'm Garvey Heights. And that Rastaman will lead more to Garvey than to His Majesty because he can see a practicality in a Garvey. He's not seeing any practicality in His Imperial Majesty because he's not looking for that. All right. OMC, His Majesty, is within the European paradigm. All right. Jesus in King the character whatsoever. But we'll get to that later. All right. So you have Ethiopian Orthodox Church, you have the Garveyites, and then now you have the Church of Haile Selassie. This is a church that was run by Abuna Fox. And it was, and Green Street out in Brooklyn. I went there a couple of times. My brethren went there because we wanted to give our youth them a structure. All right, we want the youth them to have some kind of a structure. Not just say you're a Rasta man, you're out there and there's nothing cohesive about you being a Rasta man, nothing connected to you or whatever. So we carry youth them go Church of Haile Selassie. All right. You remember, how this church came about. And one of the main reasons the church came about is that Abuna Fox, all right, provided support for ones and ones who were in prison on Rikers Island. So he would go into the prisons and do a ministry, as they would call it, the Babylon would call it, and go in and do a ministry. All right. And one of the things that he did more than anything else to push the whole Rastafarian concept, I wouldn't even say religion, but we are alive within Babylon system, is to have the state of New York declare it an official religion. And once it becomes an official religion, ones and ones who go in a prison, right, can and say they are Rastaman, their religious rights and their religious belief had to be respected. I mean, if a man says, I'm a Rastaman, I don't eat pork, I don't eat meat, or I only eat fish, all right, it has to be respected. And him have to get in Bible and him be able to meet with other Rasta, right? And associate himself with other people and get him time, just like all the Christians and the Muslims and everybody else get them time to sit around and do them service. The Rasta man in a prison now get that amount of recognition and respect because of Abuna Fox and the Church of Haile Selassie. So, recap. We have Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Gaviites, Church of Haile Selassie. Then we have the Ethiopian World Federation as another organization. They have brethren and brethren who belong to the Ethiopian World Federation who consider themselves Rastaman. What I found mostly in being around Ethiopian World Federation is that most of the brethren them were Nyabingi. I don't know why it turned out that way, but most of the brethren them were Nyabingi in the EWF. And just like every other organ, you have ego, and ego take over a man, and power struggle. And the EWF faces power struggle like every other organization. But His Majesty, right, sent the doctor here from Ethiopia to set up an organization for Africans that were in the diaspora. And he started the Ethiopian World Federation right here in New York. And it was supposed to be an organization that catered to the needs and organizational wants of Africans in New York. The Rastaman came in because of the whole His Majesty connection and decided that this was something that them should be particularly invested in. And so you had the EWF, Ethiopian World Federation. EWF had a number of chapters, and one of the chapters was in Jamaica, right? In Davis Lane. I'm not sure if it was chapter 15 or chapter 16, but I know the chapter was there. We get to that in a moment, right? When His Majesty was overthrown by the Dirge, there became a split in the royal family. And the Enderasa, who is the head of the Crown Council, because people might think that the monarchy in Ethiopia was more like a dictatorship, but it was not, because it was always the Crown Council that decided on who is emperor. So after His Majesty made his transition, after his physical separated from his spiritual, There were those in the royal family who think that Asper Wasson should be the emperor, although they were outside of the country. And then after Asper Wasson make his transition, they were saying Zari Yaqub should be the emperor. And it's almost 50 going to 51 years now since the dirge. And the Crown Council has not chosen an emperor for Ethiopia. All you have is the royal family, the princes, Ermias, no, Prince Ermias, Prince Fakir, who was the Enderasa, and Zari Yaqub, and other princes that came up over the last 50 years. Most of them was living in Maryland, some is in England. But the faction created the Imperial Ethiopian World Federation. Now, the Imperial Ethiopian World Federation is supposed to be the official organization of the royal family of Ethiopia. And so you had a conflict now between the IEWF and the EWF. All right. As an attorney, they brought me in the middle of it. And that's how I you know, accumulate my knowledge of these organizations. And not the intimate workings, because it was not a day-to-day thing, but an understanding of the conflict that plagued the organizations. All right. EWF wanted to be the official arm, and that IEWF wanted to be the official arm, and that EWF should just move to the side. And the conflict started, and it couldn't end. I know the EWF still exists as a shell, and the IEWF might only exist on paper. But one good thing come out of the EWF that I considered remarkable, right? And it's that the brethren Pennycook, Ronald Pennycook, he published the words of His Majesty in a big book. I lost mine and I beg him more than once to republish that book because I would definitely want a copy of it. But it's a big sayings of His Majesty, speeches and words and all of that, and it's big. I read it maybe 2 or 3 times. There were some things that I read more than once, but I went through it during a 7, 8 year period when I was, delving into Rasta on a historical basis and on a political basis, right? So Ras Pennycook published that book, right? Why Saying of His Majesty. Real big, thick hardcover book. That is tremendous coming out of Ethiopian World Federation. All right. Now, Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Garveyite, Church of Haile Selassie, Ethiopian World Federation, Imperial Ethiopian World Federation. These are what they call the, 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 the rooms. These are the rooms. And then you have the mansions, as we call them. Not just the house, but the mansion, right? So the three main mansions in Rastafari is the 12th tribe of Israel, Order of the Nyabingi, the Ethiopian African Black International Church of Salvation. Let me say that again. Ethiopian African Black International Church of Salvation. Yabekos, where them call Bobo Shanti. And then in the Order of the Nyabingi, where we call the Nyabingi. And then you have the 12th tribe of Israel, which they call 12 tribe. All right? Now, 12 tribe used to be EWF in Davis Lane. And they were EWF in Davis Lane until Gadman became the leader. And when Gadman became the leader, the energy that came within 12 tribe at that time, and within the philosophy that Gadman came with, was more or less a resurgence of the Marcus Garvey Back to Africa movement. It became big. And it became big because His Majesty had ceded land to the diaspora. All right, and Jamaicans consider themselves the Rasta man and the one who more entitled to the land. All right, began to formulate a plan to go populate the land. All right, in Shashamani. Songs were sing about Shashamani and all of that. All right, so God came and he started to organize the 12 tribe. And 12 tribe was organized first like a lodge. You had a Jews book and you pay your Jews. And every Friday you go pay your Jews. All right, brethren, all of the brethren in the neighborhood became 12 tribe members and everybody of them Jews. Cause condition was so that people said, listen, if we can try it somewhere else that has some more of a future, then let me get into this. Let me go into this, brethren and brethren, you know. The love that man show amongst each other was dear and it was strong. And a lot of brethren went into 12 tribe. A lot went into 12 tribe. When they moved to, I believe, Augustown or Gardentown, I think it's Augustown, brethren and brethren used to collect every man Jews and them Jews book and go up. Like one or two man would go up to Garden Road and pay the Jews. So man was regular Jews payer. All right? Until one of the brethren, Levi second, we call him Footman, he was one of the first in the neighborhood that ended up going into Ethiopia. I don't know if he reached Shashamani, but I know he went to Ethiopia. All right? And that was revealing. That created even more fervor to become a part of 12 tribe. More people came in the neighborhood. We see that at least. All right? A part of the plan has been fulfilled. You know? Man, I go Africa, we're ready. All right? To go. And someone didn't care that there were no particular plan, that there were no civil plan, right? There were no plan for anything. Them just want to leave Jamaica and go up on the land. That's the connection that man and man had at the time for the whole land of Shashamane, whole land of Ethiopia and His Majesty. And this was before His Majesty's demise, before 1974. And the energy was there. All right? After the brethren reached Ethiopia, and we all celebrate, and we are planning now to see who's the next man that's going. The brethren came back from Ethiopia some months later, and he was gravely ill. And what he told us was that when he got sick, he went to Black Star Hospital in Addis, and he was told that Africans before Africans, Ethiopians before everybody else. Right? Therefore, he sat on a bench, according to him, for about 2 days and did not get looked at. So he ended up taking a bus to Kenya and then catching flight back to Jamaica. Now that was a damper. That put a damper on a whole lot of things. All right. I mean, it wasn't so attractive anymore when we see that you go to Ethiopia and you could even get medical treatment, and you went to the land believing that yes, you reach home now, you're gonna be supported, only to find that you were considered less than Ethiopians. You weren't treated properly. Mm. I mean, it's local people. Yeah, local people. But the virgin get sick and he came back. And after his marriage to pass, make his transition, 12 tribe made a change also. 12 tribe make a deeper dive into the European paradigm, as you would say. A deeper dive. All right? Because at the time, the whole thing with 12 tribe is that His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, born as Tafari Makonnen, was the creator, God Almighty. And if you're going to be a Rastaman at the time, you have to accept that His Majesty is the creator. And as the creator, His Majesty cannot die. All right? We put the word die within the whole normal understanding of the word. All right? So when the dirge happened and His Majesty spirit separated from his structure, the 12 tribe didn't know how to deal with that. They didn't know how to deal with it. Right? Bob sing him song, Charlie, children, yeah, Jah live. Who say in their heart, Rasta, your God is dead. Right? Didn't know how to deal with it. And so they came up with the concept of Jesus Christ and his kingly character and flipped the script to now be considering His Majesty as the Jesus Christ and this is, and therefore he is going to return back into this physical manifestation. And so 12 tribe move more and more over into the European paradigm and the European way of looking at this reality. And it has held on as a shell of itself from in the 1970s. And some of the principles that it had championed back in the 70s were forgotten and discarded, put to the side. And it became an organization, just like the other Rastafari organization, riddled with conflict and dissension amongst the people them. And that's what it is today. Now, before 12 tribe, there was the order of the Nyabingi. The order of the Nyabingi, in my viewpoint, is the warrior mansion. The order of the Nyabingi doesn't hold on to the Bible as if it's some holy book and every word must be adhered to. That's not the order of the Nyabingi. The order of the Nyabingi is more revolutionary. More revolutionary, right? Peter Tosh, revolutionary, all right? But the order of the Nyabingi became embroiled in a conflict with the other mansion. Because, first there was the order of Nyabingi, and then there was the Ethiopian Orthodox Black International Church, Ethiopian African Black International Church of Salvation, the two of them, right? You had Prince Emmanuel, and I think the Nyabingi was, I can't remember his name, was out in the Spanish town, and things happened, right? But it was the two. That conflict began when His Majesty came and they kept the first ISIS in a grass yard, which grass yard became Coronation Market. And they call it grass yard because it used to be a place where you sell coal. And when you bring charcoal to market, you always pack it in grass so that the coal not crush up. So you kind of cushion the coal. And when you finish selling the coal, because nobody want to carry on grass, them just take coal. So when you finish selling the coal, the grass would be all over the place. So it's called grass yard. All right? So the conflict between Nyabingi, and Bobo Shanti began in the first ISIS. Because the first ISIS, there was no organization. They were just man who see the divinity of His Majesty and wanted to organize a movement around the divinity of His Majesty. But ego came into play between Plana, Martimo Plano, and Prince Emmanuel split. So you find that not really animosity at the time, but dissension, differences in viewpoint and outlook became more pronounced. How Plana see it and how Prince Emmanuel see it was at odds with each other. They had their own idea of who His Majesty was, and they both met His Majesty. All right, Prince Emmanuel, Martimo Plano. All right, them both Martimo Plano start consider himself some kind of deity. Prince Emmanuel members start say him a Jesus. All right, so human flaws and the inability to separate spiritual reality from physical reality always lead to internal conflict within the man. All right, and that's what really happened. So the Ethiopian African Black International Church of Salvation with Prince Emmanuel, they, in my viewpoint, are the organization that lead more towards spirituality. All right, but them still carry them consciousness within the European paradigm because they held on to the Bible and the European way of interpreting the Bible. The European way of interpreting the Bible. All right? It's a transliteration. And you can't blame them because they had nothing else. They could not know the truth because there was no reference for them to put it up against. And the truth is relative. I mean, the truth is related to something else. And if it's the truth, there is something else that to be related to. And if you're given a what they call propaganda, right, and you can't relate it to anything else, then it becomes the truth to you. But it can't be the truth until it's related. That's why them say the truth is relative, meaning it's relative to something else, right? So they held on to the Bible, all right? I bring my children them to Sabbath service, Sabbath service, on Saturdays for about 2 or 3 years. Because again, we want to give them some kind of structure. And I wanted my youth them to see um, that it's always spiritually beneficiary to see the divine in a reality. All right? I always want to see the divine in reality. So we give them that structure. But we realize that the brethren who say they were the priest had a serious shortcoming. Serious. Because many times it was as if I was in a Baptist church. Many times, many days. It was all about the Sabbath, keeping the Sabbath holy, and if you don't keep the Sabbath holy, you die and all them things. So it was a certain amount of extremism in the outlook, right? That's what it was. Extremism in the outlook, right? You know, because it's a European paradigm. Remember now, this God who is the God of love in the Old Testament, New Testament, is the God of the great creator, he's God, he's a gentle God, he's a divine God, he's God of gratitude and all of that. There has not been another character written anywhere in the world that is more despicable than the supposed God that's written in the Bible. And if you As a Rasta man say, that's the God I'm worshiping. Of course, you're gonna have dissension within your spirit. You're gonna have conflict. You're gonna be confused about what you're even saying. And you're gonna start believing and holding on to propaganda as the truth without being able to relate it to anything. You can't have truth that is not related to anything. It has to be related. So, Bobo is there. We're gonna go into them deeper at another occasion, all right? But they're there, barely existing, still full of conflict, still full of conflict. Nabbing is there, still full of conflict. And the only functioning that we see happening is an anniversary. Man want to celebrate his majesty birth. Man want to celebrate the new year. Man want to celebrate the Battle of Adowa. You understand? These are the things that Rasta now gravitate towards. And we have become what you might call a paleanthropic organization of sub-organizations. The one commonality with all of the organization that we have outlined, Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Gaviites, Church of Haile Selassie, Ethiopian World Federation, Imperial Ethiopian World Federation, the 12 Tribe of Israel, the other Nyabingi, and Bobo Shanti, Ethiopian African Black International Church of Salvation, is that they see His Majesty at the center of the organization. Remember now, right? Rastaman who go in a Ethiopian Orthodox Church say that His Majesty was a Christian. And they're there because His Majesty was a Christian and this was His Majesty church that he went to. That's why they're there. The Gaviites are Gaviites. The Rastaman are Gaviites because Gavi announced the coming of a great king. It is His Imperial Majesty. The Church of Haile Selassie, we don't need to say nothing more. The Church of Haile Selassie. And EWF is an organization that was sanctioned and came into existence because of the will of His Majesty. The IEWF is an offshoot, but at the same time, it wants to say they have the sanctions to run the organization. 12 Tribe of Israel started out seeing His Majesty as God Almighty, and now they're seeing His Majesty as Jesus Christ and His King, the character. The Isle of Nyabingi saw His Majesty as God Almighty. They have not reconciled His Majesty's separation of body and soul, and also those the Boba Shanti. They have not reconciled that either. Right? So, where is the Rastaman today? Where is he? Who is the Rastaman today? Is it just a man with locks and red, green, and gold, and maybe a spliff named Jacana? Or a man who just jump up and say, Selassie, Joe, Rastafari. Him and the Rastaman. Rastafari is much deeper than what they might think. The truth attracted the mitochondrial DNA. And although, right, the manifestation of that memory carried them astray, the truth exists. We're going to start revealing the truth in the next coming podcast and make people know what Rastafari is. Because it's not yesterday and it's not Percival Howell with the promise key and it's not Garvey with look to the coming Africa for the great king. It's none of that. It's been here all along. It was always here. And it was extremely important in Egypt, Mizraim, Kemet, Al-Kebalan, Mizra. Blessings.